Stern has become such a wussified sycophant, he doesn't realize that telling Kamala that he'd vote for a wall is telling her that he knows she's as dumb as one. I mean, not to mention, Trump is the wall candidate, not Cackle's McKnee pads. Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
That brings me to Howard Stern and his interview of Kamala Harris, where he put the cards on the table about how he was feeling, in particular about her latest media tour, which did not include Saturday Night Live, but she was lampooned on it a little. A lampoon may be too strong, but she was mocked, as they usually do, just to Republicans. Take a listen.
There was a time when Howard Stern was feared, hated, and secretly admired all at once. He was the man who mocked sacred cows, enraged politicians, and gave parents headaches because their kids wouldn't stop tuning in. He called himself the king of all media, and for years, nobody dared argue. But today, that same man sits in front of a microphone looking more like a carefully polished celebrity than the rebel who once sent shockwaves through the airwaves. What happened? That's the question that has been echoing through the media world. How did the unapologetic provocateur become what critics now call a sanitized figure, desperate for elite approval? The answer isn't pretty. Stern's decline isn't just about getting older or changing with the times, it's about abandoning the very identity that made him legendary.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there. When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country. Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the, where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
He used to thrive on chaos, controversy, and raw honesty. Now, the man who once terrified regulators and mocked Hollywood egos spends his time massaging the very same celebrities he used to ridicule. The fall is hard to watch because it's not just a career shift, it feels like a complete betrayal of everything his audience once believed in. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now, let's continue. Because the truth is, Stern's downfall didn't come out of nowhere. The cracks began to show during one specific moment that revealed just how far he had drifted from the man he used to be. It all became painfully clear during his interview with Kamala Harris. Instead of the sharp-tongued Stern, who never held back, listeners got a nervous fanboy stumbling over his words. He confessed he was so nervous because he wanted everything to go well for her, for the country, for the interview. Then came the line that sent shockwaves. He said he would even vote for a wall if she asked him to. The Howard Stern, who once ripped apart politicians, was suddenly reduced to a sycophant, groveling for approval like a rookie intern begging to keep his job.
Period, while listening to it. You should hear what keeps him up at night.
The moment exposed just how far he had fallen. Rather than challenge her, he worried about how Saturday Night Live mocked her with Maya Rudolph's impersonation. He admitted he hated seeing her made fun of. Imagine that Howard Stern, the man who built an empire by roasting and humiliating anyone in his path, was now upset that a politician was being impersonated on a comedy show. This wasn't just a slip-up. It was a sign that Stern's edge had dulled to the point of no return. The fearless provocateur had been replaced by a cautious celebrity cheerleader. And for fans who remembered the days of raw and unfiltered Stern, the cringe factor was off the charts. That interview didn't just disappoint, it proved the king of shock radio had officially traded rebellion for obedience. And that's when people started asking, if this was Howard Stern today, who was the man we all used to listen to back then? The answer hit like a punch in the gut.
She also appeared on Howard Stern, where he said he'd even vote for a wall over Trump. Harris replied, "I'm not a wall, but I am plastered."
The man people tuned in for, the one who mocked sacred cows, roasted celebrities, and made the FCC sweat bullets, was gone. In his place stood a polished version of Stern, more interested in protecting his image than shaking things up. The transformation wasn't subtle either. Critics compared it to discovering your favorite punk rock hero had quit the band and opened a yoga studio in the Hamptons. Think about it. Old Stern threw baloney at strippers, ranted about politicians, and laughed at the very idea of political correctness. New Stern? He sips kale smoothies, apologizes for his past jokes, and speaks with the soft, careful tone of someone reading a luxury car commercial. It's not evolution, it's a meltdown of identity. The man who used to say whatever he wanted now checks every word with legal before daring to speak. Greg Gutfeld described it best. The old Stern was a wrecking ball, unapologetic and raw. The new Stern is a choreographed dancer, terrified of stepping on the wrong toes. The irony is brutal. A man who once mocked everyone now hides behind caution and scripted smiles. And that's what makes this story so unsettling. Stern wasn't just losing his edge, he was losing his very soul. The mask of rebellion was still there, but underneath, the fire that once defined him was long gone. And then came the hypocrisy, and it was impossible to ignore. The same Howard Stern who once bragged about being the outsider, the truth teller, the guy who mocked the elites, was now rubbing elbows with them. Hollywood dinners, Hamptons parties, cozy chats with A-listers, this was his new world. The rebel who mocked phoniness had become the host, serving it on a silver platter. Instead of challenging celebrities, he now plays therapist, nodding along as actors and pop stars pour out carefully polished stories meant to boost their image. His studio, once the epicenter of chaos and unpredictability, now feels more like a spa lounge where nothing risky ever happens. Even his voice changed. It's softer, slower, almost like he's narrating a luxury commercial rather than running a talk show. Greg Gutfeld mocked this transformation as Stern's fossilization preserved by nostalgia and hair dye, a wax figure trying to convince the world he's still alive. The man who once struck fear into public figures now sounds like a concierge at a red carpet event, making sure everyone feels comfortable. And for those who remembered the Howard Stern who pushed boundaries and made America gasp, this new version was a betrayal. He didn't just abandon his edge, he embraced the very system he built his career destroying. The King of Shock Radio had officially become a pampered celebrity, smiling politely while his empire of rebellion crumbled into dust. That's when Megyn Kelly stepped in, and her critique cut even deeper.
But it is incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came.
She didn't come with jokes or sarcasm. She came with cold, sharp facts. She reminded everyone that Stern had built his fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars, by being the very opposite of woke. He mocked political correctness, loved Donald Trump, exploited the mentally ill for laughs, and even wore blackface. And yet, after cashing in on all of that, he suddenly reinvented himself as the poster boy for progressive sensitivity. Kelly pointed out the hypocrisy. Stern wasn't brave for changing his tune, he was calculating. He didn't grow into a new worldview, he folded under pressure. Loudness, she argued, was never courage. All that shock and outrage was always about ratings, not principles. And when the ratings game changed, Stern changed right along with it, abandoning the edge that once defined him. She compared him to other comics who followed the same path. Jimmy Kimmel, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, all of them once crossed lines, all of them wore blackface, all of them built fame on edgy material. Then, once they had enough money and clout, they reinvented themselves as champions of the very causes they used to mock.
Now remember, Stern used to throw bologna slices at strippers' butts. With accuracy, I might add. Now he's worried the possible leader of the free world can't handle his verbal foot rub. I wonder if he used to get this nervous for the strippers before he'd spank them on their bare asses with a dead fish.
The verdict was brutal. Stern's shift wasn't a moral awakening, it was survival. He traded authenticity for comfort, rebellion for privilege. And for Kelly, that was the ultimate betrayal, not just to his audience, but to the very idea of what made Howard Stern matter in the first place. And the contrast between old Stern and new Stern couldn't be more humiliating. Once upon a time, he was the guy throwing bologna slices at strippers' butts and spanking them with dead fish on live radio, just to shock the world. That chaos made him famous. But now, the same man gets nervous giving Kamala Harris a verbal foot rub, terrified that a joke might come off the wrong way. It was the clearest sign of how far he'd fallen. The man who mocked conformity, political correctness, and Hollywood phonies now embraces all of it. He's turned his show into a soft, glossy package where celebrities sit on the couch and share sanitized stories that feel more like a wellness retreat than anything resembling radio. No edge, no grit, no danger. Kelly drove the knife even deeper, saying nobody ever asked for this sensitive Stern. The audience didn't want a late-in-life therapist whispering about empathy while actors cried about their feelings. They wanted the raw, unapologetic rebel who called out power and ripped through hypocrisy. Instead, they got safe conversations designed to please elites and keep his cushy spot at the top. And that's the tragedy. He wasn't just avoiding controversy. He was selling conformity. The same man who once mocked progressives for being uptight now acts like the gatekeeper of political correctness, shielding politicians and celebrities instead of challenging them. For fans who grew up on The Fire, it felt like a total sellout. From there, the hypocrisy only grew louder. The man who once called himself a champion of free speech now hides behind political correctness like it's his personal shield. He didn't just join the establishment, he was swallowed by it. The lion who once roared against virtue signaling is now a tame house cat, purring for the approval of Hollywood elites. And the worst part? He treats his past like it never happened. All those years of outrageous, offensive antics, the very things that built his empire, he acts like they don't exist.
Okay, I hope you had a good week. I did, and no thanks to Howard Stern. True, the New York Post reported that Stern hit a chic restaurant in NYC with a crew of A-listers, including Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, Jon Hamm, Justin Theroux, Jason Bateman. I was not invited. I guess because my first name doesn't begin with the letter J.
It's as if the shock jock years were some embarrassing secret, something unrelated to the sanitized, enlightened persona he parades around today. But you can't separate the two. His entire empire was built on chaos and controversy. The penthouse life he enjoys now is paid for by those years of insanity. Kelly was relentless. She reminded everyone that Stern used to thrive by making people uncomfortable, by forcing hard conversations through shock and confrontation. Now, he avoids discomfort at all costs. He's terrified of criticism, terrified of being labeled, desperate to fit in with the very crowd that once condemned him. This wasn't evolution, it was retreat. He didn't grow wiser. He shrank. He folded himself into a cocoon of money, privilege, and elite approval. The Howard Stern of today isn't a rebel. He's a ghost of his former self, still holding the mic, but no longer brave enough to use it. And then came the brutal reality check. Stern's downfall wasn't a secret. It was happening in plain sight. The same man who once dominated culture with fearless shock radio now spends his nights dining at chic New York City restaurants with Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, Jon Hamm, and Justin Theroux. The rebel who mocked Hollywood phoniness is now desperate to sit at their table. Greg Gutfeld painted the picture perfectly. Stern's studio, once a madhouse of chaos, now feels like a haunted mansion of irrelevance. Dim lights, slow pacing, and a voice that no longer sounds rebellious, just polished, like a commercial for luxury cars. He didn't age into wisdom. He fossilized, a relic of a man preserved by nostalgia and hair dye. And when he claimed that Kamala Harris's candidacy was too important to even joke about, that was the final nail in the coffin. This was a guy who built his career by mocking anyone and everyone. No sacred cows, no exceptions. Now he insists that a politician is off limits because the future of the country is too important. For a man who made millions by ripping apart authority figures, this sounded pathetic, even cowardly. The king of shock radio had become a background voice, the kind you hear in a CNN panel instead of a cultural battleground. He didn't just lose his edge, he lost his place in the conversation. For fans who remembered the fire, this was the moment they realized it had burned out completely. That loss of fire came with a price, and it was his audience. The people who once admired Stern for being raw, fearless, and brutally honest are now stuck with a watered-down product designed to be safe and bland. What used to be dangerous, unpredictable radio has turned into something closer to a glorified press junket. Celebrity guests carefully toe the line, telling sanitized anecdotes while Stern nods along like a polite host at a dinner party.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
I agree with you.
And when I see them, how did you react to the Saturday Night Live bit?
Here's Stern on anyone daring to poke a little fun at Kamala.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about.
Kelly didn't let this slide. She hammered the point that Stern's so-called evolution wasn't about wisdom or enlightenment. It was about survival. He wanted comfort more than authenticity. Instead of being the rebel who challenged power, he became part of the machine that feeds it. The wild man who once bragged about pushing limits now hides behind scripted interviews and PR-approved conversations. Greg went even further, mocking Stern's desperate attempts to seem relevant. He compared Stern's show to a retirement home radio hour, with guests in bathrobes sipping tea while reminiscing about the good old days. Every broadcast feels like Stern is begging to be taken seriously in a world that never needed him to be serious in the first place. The saddest part? In trying so hard to please everyone, Stern has managed to please no one. He betrayed the hardcore fans who loved his rebellion, but he also failed to win over the progressives he tries to impress. What's left is a hollow shell of a career, a man caught in limbo, admired by none. The contradictions only deepened as Stern tried to reinvent himself through podcasting. Once, he thrived on unpredictability confrontations, chaos, shocking moments that no one else dared to touch. Now, his podcast feels like an echo chamber, a sterile safe space where famous guests share harmless, carefully curated stories. No grit, no bite. Just polished conversations that melt into the endless scroll of digital content. Greg called out Stern's new trick, weaponizing victimhood. He positions himself as a defender of free speech, but only when it suits his brand. His outrage is selective, his battles chosen carefully to protect his image. That was never the Stern people tuned in for. The old Stern was reckless, unfiltered, willing to risk everything for a laugh or a headline. The new Stern is terrified of risk, hiding behind platitudes about empathy and unity. Kelly sharpened the blade even more. She explained that Stern's new woke persona hasn't protected him, it's made him a target from both sides. Progressives don't trust him, conservatives see him as a sellout, and his old fans barely recognize him. He's stranded in cultural no man's land, stuck between the legacy of his outrageous past and the bland reality of his present. And the result is devastating. The man who once shaped pop culture is now a cautionary tale. In trying to survive, Stern lost what made him matter. The shock jock who once stood outside the establishment is now its most desperate servant. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Howard Stern didn't just lose his edge, he lost his soul. His career trajectory mirrors his personal life, both carefully managed, sanitized, and stripped of the chaos that once defined him. The wild man who bragged about shocking America now lives behind PR walls, every move calculated, every word filtered. Greg drove this point home by highlighting Stern's old controversies. Back in the day, Stern was the guy who said the most tasteless, jaw-dropping things on the planet, even making jokes about tragedies that left people furious. And now, that same man is breathless with admiration for politicians, treating them like fragile idols too important to mock. The shift isn't just strange, it's pathetic. Kelly argued that his so-called transformation wasn't growth, but surrender. It was the act of a man who couldn't face the weight of his own past, so he buried it under layers of fake enlightenment. Stern now spends his days presenting himself as a wise, sensitive figure, as if he can erase decades of outrageous stunts with a few soft-spoken interviews. But his audience knows better. By chasing elite approval, Stern betrayed the very foundation of his empire. His story is a warning. When rebellion is replaced with comfort, authenticity dies. He once embodied the power of free speech and cultural defiance. Today, he embodies what happens when that defiance is tamed, packaged, and sold back to the establishment he used to fight. Greg and Kelly tied it all together by exposing Stern's fall as more than just a personal collapse. It was a cultural warning. His shift from the king of all media to a cautious, overpaid podcast host reflected how rebellion itself gets swallowed, repackaged, and neutered by the very system it once fought. What was once wild, raw defiance has been turned into safe, marketable entertainment. Kelly explained that Stern's new persona hasn't earned him admiration from progressives or respect from conservatives. Instead, he's trapped in a toxic middle ground too politically correct for his old fans, but never progressive enough for the left. The result? A man with no loyal audience, clinging to an identity that no longer fits. Greg hammered the final nail by saying, Stern's legacy is the story of rebellion commodified. He went from shaking the foundations to reinforcing them, from a voice of dissent to a corporate entertainer who fears his own shadow. What once felt like revolution is now nothing more than staged comfort. In the end, they argued, Stern's greatest crime wasn't losing his edge. It was pretending that surrender was evolution. He dressed up cowardice as growth, packaging conformity as enlightenment. And in doing so, he became the very thing he once mocked. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.